Today, I'm super happy to have Nintynick with us. I would call him a friend, but more importantly than that, he's a DAO mechanism designer and also been a governance facilitator. He's been in this space for quite a while. He's primarily a contributor to HATS protocol. That's a new protocol using NFTs as roles. So being able to do permission management based on NFTs. And previously, he's been part of many different DAOs, including contributing to Raid Guild, EvenGov, and is also part of Groundwork. Before that, he was a developer of neurosymbolic AI algorithms. And so he's naturally been very interested in the intersection of AI and blockchain technology, specifically on DAOs, and has kindly accepted to share some of his research and thinking in this space with us today. So please, over to you, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel, so much for having me and DAO for hosting this. The intersection of AI and DAOs are basically two of the things that I'm the most curious about and most interested in. And it's a great pleasure to have this as a first opportunity to share some of my thinking in a more polished form. That being said, it's not very polished at all, and this is really, I want it to be more of a discussion than a presentation. It can help me refine my thinking, and I'm sure I'm a strong believer in collective intelligence, so I think that's how we can improve. So this is coming with the meme of DAO contributor as a service, thinking about how an AI will be a contributor to a DAO and how we can create many opportunities for AIs to participate in DAOs. My name is Nintynick, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I wanted to start with an idea that's an old idea that's coming to life now in DAOs from Mir Den Cohen back in 1986. The idea was an ownerless and artificially intelligent organization that would repurchase all of its outstanding shares and govern itself. This is something that people have been thinking about for quite some time. Professor Dan Cohen is a law student, law professor, and people have been thinking about this from the computational angle, the AI angle, the legal angle for a while, and it's so exciting to be at this moment in DAOs where this is starting to come to life. But why does it matter? Like, what's the point of caring about AI and DAOs? The way that I think about this whole space is the intersection, the progression of basically organizational efficiency. I think about DAOs as a disruptive technology, and basically been calling this the coordination flippening. Is, if you have the ETH flippening, ETH and Bitcoin, the coordination flippening is when DAOs will become more operationally efficient than traditional organizations, and definitely use inputs and improvements on the y-axis here, but roughly speaking, I think we have a network effects within DAOs that empowers us to become more efficient, and then also in the ecosystem of DAOs broadly, being able to reproduce the working technologies and processes and fork them, compose them to share our learnings across the space, I think will create an exponential learning rate. So that's why automation is so impactful and so important within DAOs. So just the three topic areas I want to share today are about agent-based modeling for DAOs. The second one is automation in what I'm calling microservice DAOs, which is basically a service DAO that automates itself into a sort of microservice, as I call it back to the architecture idea. And then the third one is interfaces for AI stakeholdership in DAOs. And we've got a big list, and maybe you'll have more. We can talk about the different ways that AI might participate and contribute to DAOs. Just to give you a little intro to myself before we get started. I started thinking about AI in probably 2009 when I heard a very famous kind of AI evangelist start talking about artificial general intelligence, and it really lit the fire inside of me and get excited about the possibility of AI being one of the most impactful technologies that would come about in my life. So my why, my purpose is really to help transition humanity to a post-scarcity economy, and to think about the ways that we can have a symbiotic relationship with AGI. In DAOs, I was introduced to the idea of a DAC, a decentralized autonomous corporation, in 2017, and started to just get the idea of this organization that manages itself, people coordinating with no managers and leaders. And some friends at the Media Lab had basically shared the idea over many hours, and I've been curious about them ever since, but I just got involved full-time in DAOs at the beginning of last year. I've been participating in Raid Guild, been helping to create SIFChains DAO, and I've done a number of different DAO experiments over the last year, and now working on PATS protocol, which is to do authority delegation and role management within DAOs using NFTs. I can talk about that later if we want to talk about mechanisms. The second thing I want to say, just as a precursor, is that I share all of this in the spirit of open source collaboration. Really believe that we're better together, and that the systems that we're creating will hopefully reward everyone for their contributions fairly. And the passing on what has been shared with me is the same mentality and perspective. So I want to create a building block that everyone here can build off of, and I think that use this, steal this, and let's create the future together. And the last one is just my style is please interrupt. You can comment in the chat if you have questions, and we can go along the way, or just start talking and interrupt me. I would much rather have interesting, engaging conversation around the topics than to just talk at you with slides. This will take I don't think this will take the whole time, so we should have some time for discussion at the end, unless we have a discussion throughout. Okay, let's jump in. So the first concept is agent-based modeling for DAOs. So my experience building AI algorithms is really trying to create a novel AI, a neurosymbolic AI that was really thinking about creating a way for machines to think kind of like humans think, and create a human-in-the-loop approach that was actually understanding what language was, rather than doing basically large statistical models that provide very meaningful results, but don't, in my view, don't really understand the underlying concepts. Agent-based modeling is just one of the concepts that we used in the approach to building our AI. And for those of you who don't know, agent-based models are basically used as ways of simulating networks of people, organizations, and trying to predict behaviors in those groups of people. Especially trying to predict complex and emergent behavior. So like a network is very hard to predict because it doesn't have direct inputs and outputs. Complex systems you can't actually just model what the outcomes are going to be. So agent-based modeling is a way to try to get toward meaningful simulations of what might happen. And in my previous project, we called this agent an intelligent agent. So I've been thinking more recently about DAOs as intelligent agents. And the model you can use to think of in the agent-based modeling frame for DAOs is that agents are basically a person, an AI, or a group of agents, like a sub-DAO. The DAO itself has interfaces. So there are interfaces where the DAO can interact, like the agents within the DAO can interact, and then there are interfaces where DAOs can interact with one another. Since it's a recursive definition, that makes sense. And then I think about the DAO as any agent has goals. In AI, you might talk about this as an objective function. And then a DAO has resources like tokens in its treasury, or at the attention of its members, specific knowledge that it needs to route to the right places. And in order for a DAO to get what it wants, it needs to advocate for what it wants, and it needs to allocate its resources towards its goals. That's like the most abstract frame. And I think that this as a foundation basically will help us to create help us think about what a DAO is and help to try to predict the models in the future. I'm seeing some stuff pop up in the chat, but I can't see the chat. So if anyone wants to help me out with that, I would love some help. Just to illustrate the importance of agent-based modeling and the impact of it, many of you may have heard of Conway's game of life. The point I want to illustrate is that very interesting, surprising behaviors can come out of very simple sets of rules. So Conway's game of life kind of looks like this. You have your 4 main rules. In the current generation, if a pixel is lonely, like it doesn't have enough people around it, it will die. If it is sufficient number of people, it will not change. If there are too many people, then it will also die. But if there are just the perfect number of people, 3 agents nearby, then it will reproduce. And what you start to get is something that kind of looks like this. You have all these different behaviors. It would be hard to predict, but you could obviously model this. But it's kind of like this whole world of different interactions that are happening and causing interesting things along the way. And as people have studied this, there are some certain patterns that are stable and that emerge that have been kind of used to develop the game even further. And this one is very basic. You're seeing this is actually the way that the agents will continue to operate for the rest of eternity. You start to see you can get slightly more complex ones, even more complex ones, bigger ones that repeat on kind of a cycle, or even move across the screen, across the simulation. And then this is an example of one that's repeating, but also outputting basically new, more complex agents that are then gliding across the screen. And of course, this goes on quite a bit. So you have this thing that's outputting these other things. You have this, here's like the most beautiful example that I saw, which is that you have this giant version that's outputting these little versions that are outputting these very little versions. So suddenly, from these 4 simple rules, you're getting very complex behavior, and it becomes interesting. So this is kind of a very reduced use case for what I think DAOs are going to evolve into as well. So you see this rich, complex, surprising behavior emerging from the simple rules and interactions. Here, for example, you might think about the proposals in a Moloch DAO. These are very simple proposals, but the interactions that will emerge from the complexity of DAOs, it could be very surprising to us. In fact, it already is if you think about some of the most recent dramas that are occurring in various DAOs. That's the main reason that I wanted to think about agent-based modeling in DAOs. So that as a foundation. Now I want to talk about why microservice DAOs are a place for automation to emerge, the incentive alignment for a microservice DAO to basically create automation. Forgive me, please, for not having good illustrations on the next couple of slides. So the atomic unit of coordination in any group is teamwork. The hardest problems about producing any work, as I'm sure you know, in R&DAO, is getting a group of people together that can actually work together, human to human, and produce a meaningful output. Teamwork is going to take trust, which builds over time. And my prediction, many other people have said similar things. I agree with this, is that you might see things like 3 to 7 person adventuring parties, like we might call it in Raid Guild, a raid or a team. Will build up trust through working together, and they'll take that atomic unit and carry that teamwork from one project to the next. So you imagine that instead of me being in 5 DAOs, I'm part of a service DAO that is in turn part of, say, 5 DAOs. Service DAOs are a great on-ramp, I'll mention, because you start doing the work that you're already good at. You've built up skills outside of Web3, you can bring them into Web3. You're doing it alongside people who complement you. You're earning in a Web3 native way. And I think that overall the work in DAOs and DAOs of DAOs or mesh networks will be primarily executed by these kinds of teams. So now thinking about what this means in the mesh network, the DAO's perspective is that it doesn't actually care what agent is doing the work. So if we go back to the agent-based modeling frame, and you have agents as agents, AIs, or groups of agents, or sub DAOs or teams like a service DAO, the contributor from the DAO's perspective could pretty much be a black box. So the DAO will develop a compensation model that distributes pay for the upside of the value created for each of these identities, regardless of if they're individuals or if they're service DAOs or if they're AIs. So almost like an API, or programmatic interface, the DAO is going to get the work product from all these different types of agents, and then it will send value to it. So that I think that's going to be like a very solid version of what DAOs or how DAOs are operating in the future. Especially more permissionless DAOs. Not all DAOs will be like this. But the thing is that the service DAO it becomes a perfect place for automation to emerge, because if you start off as an individual providing a service, you could try to scale up into a sort of agency, and then the automation, you might try to automate the components of that, which will evolve over time. Skip the preconditions for now. So the last bit here is that there's the service DAOs, in order to try to increase their margins, are basically incentivized to develop operational efficiencies and potentially automations that improve their margins. So if I build a service DAO and then I try to automate what's inside of it, and I still have various DAOs that I'm participating in compensating me for the value that I'm creating, then it will be fundamentally congruent with allowing AI to be created and produce value. I think my hypothesis is that entire microservice DAOs will eventually become automated. I'm curious if there's an incentive to decentralize. That's a discussion topic that we can go to later. And as operational costs, as basically the automation goes from 0 to 100%, the operational costs will go, approach 0, and the number of DAOs the microservice DAO could actually serve scales very broadly. So that suddenly you have this group of 3 to 7 people who are serving 5 DAOs, and then they automate and they can serve 10 or 25 DAOs, and then they fully automate and they can serve hundreds of DAOs maybe. I think that this is the primary way that AIs are going to enter into becoming DAO contributors. So that's like the next level of foundation. So we have the agent-based modeling approach that gives us this the foundation for thinking about automation and DAOs. This is how the automation will actually form and is incentive aligned to be created. So you can think about this as kind of the life cycle of how a microservice DAO might evolve, based on what I was just describing. And then lastly, we have the various interfaces for what types of microservice DAOs or what types of AIs might actually participate. So this is like the meat of it. Where are the areas where AI can create value in DAOs, and what is necessary for those AIs to be created and exist? And how are we doing on questions or anything in the chat? Does anyone have any questions or things they'd like to discuss?
We have a comment from Vishal saying that perhaps YGG might already be doing this with their scholars, which can compete in different play-to-earn games.
Totally, that's a great way to think about it. I often think about in Raid Guild, we're doing work in small teams and getting paid in those small teams as part of the bigger guild, the service DAO. If you have, if we're able to automate that and create value, then that would be an emergent AI. But part of that is basically the people who are doing the work are creating training data for the AI to emerge. So in the gaming example, if we just put aside the idea that the game will regulate that you're not supposed to automate it, playing it, like say in Axie, you're not supposed to automate your playing of it, and that's why scholars exist. then you have the idea that the people who are playing the game will be able to create internal knowledge and expertise, i.e. strategies or the meta. They'll be able to like actually create the training data for the way they play the game and the actual key clicks and inputs. And then hopefully you could train an AI to play the game. The other way would be to create simulations outside of the game, say like DeepMind playing StarCraft, and then run that in the live game and potentially make profit that way.
We have a comment from Paulo. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is fascinating. I wanted to ask you about your previous slide, the one that put decentralization as the last step of the microservice DAO. I don't actually understand what you mean by decentralized as a third step, because in my view, from what I've heard, once you are able to automate a microservice DAO, then you can do like fully automate, I mean, then there's nothing else after that. Like then it would just serve other DAOs and be almost like a SaaS software that DAOs use, and it's fully automated. So what do you mean? What would happen in the third stage after fully automation for microservice DAOs?
Yeah, you're calling my bluff here, so I really appreciate this question. I have it in a little bit more detail. I think one of the final slides. Yeah, why should a microservice DAO decentralize, and will they? Some of the ideas that I have here, and I really would love to discuss this, is maybe there's an economic component where if you have a fully automated microservice DAO that is not lowering its prices, it's not distributing its ownership and profits to its clients, then it's likely that other competitors will emerge and try to compete with the market share that microservice DAO has. So I think that decentralization, from an ethos perspective, as well as from an economic perspective, could be motivated by market forces. The other thing I've been thinking about is how the founder reward of the microservice DAO might be aligned with trying to exit the community. Why do DAO project starters, summoners, why do startup founders try to exit the community at all? Like, what's the point of doing that? I think that might yield some of the answer that there's a kind of an upfront payment instead of having to take the long tail of ongoing contributions. You reduce your risk, and then again, decentralization as an ethos, I think, is an interesting point. But I'll bounce it back to you to be intellectually honest here, and anyone else who wants to riff on this. Do you think that what do you think will happen? Do you think that decentralization will happen for these types of microservice DAOs?
Yeah, I mean, go Paulo. I'll go after.
Yeah. That's actually what prompted my question, because if microservice DAOs get more and more automated and efficient, it will be a race to the bottom as to which microservice DAO can provide service for the lowest price, right? And if that happens, then there will be no money in there, right? There will be no money for a founder reward or an exit to community there, right? And so I'm not sure if that would be able to happen. Yeah. If full automation is possible and actually happens. If it is partial automation where there's still human labor involved, then that human labor is the differentiator, because that cannot easily be replicated. And I cannot clone a microservice DAO and then use the same software and the same servers and the same AI algorithms to do the same thing, right? I cannot do that with the human, so that will be the differentiator. And yeah, I think this is very similar to, in the real world, agencies like marketing agencies, design agencies, whatever. They don't really have an exit strategy, right? Because their value is the human beings in the work. And if in this case the work is automated, then I'm not sure if there will be a value. Yeah, that's basically what I'm getting.
Yeah. So on some degree, we're talking about community as the moat, And perhaps that's what the exit to community hints towards. However, for me, the exit to community is probably still very early stage. Like if we zoom out and look at the life cycle of one of these projects, like even traditional companies that take a long time to IPO, a lot of the big companies we have, they IPO'd ages ago, like very long time ago. They've been publicly traded for a while. And so I'm not sure that that's really defensible unless there is kind of like a continuous decentralization mechanism, as in like there is a mechanism to keep on distributing the ownership or the control or the benefits of controlling, you know, some version of ownership of the microservice to the new community. Otherwise, as the thing expands, other people might simply be interested to fork it or create a competing service or something like that. But it could be an ongoing flow. Paolo, you wanted to riff on this?
Yeah, just to add, or if the ownership decays, right? If there is decaying ownership, then it will force new people to come in, and then it will maybe create an incentive there. But you know, decaying ownership is a very maybe radical topic, really.
Yeah. Okay, we have two people raising their hands. Struggling to see the order.
Vishal was first.
Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to put an example out there, and you know, if you can tell me whether my interpretation is correct or not of, you know, how this might, one version of how this might execute. So let us say a group of people create an arbitrage bot, and you know, train it and make it automate it, and then is available as a service. And this arbitrage bot needs frequent retraining. So you know, it's not, there is some human labor cost or some kind of mechanism that needs to be done to keep it updated. I mean, of course, if it's a smart contract, there's nothing needed to keep it work except the cost of gas when somebody uses it or whatever. So there's no other inputs perhaps except training data to keep it, you know, to watch for model drift or whatever. So if that's the input that's needed, and sort of the exit to community impact there, you know, whether it's monetized with a token that's set up for that bot or service, and people who are contributing to training that bot, I don't know the mechanism yet, are incentivized with those tokens, and some value from the arbitrage that bot is good at is feeding back into those tokens. Would that be a good example?
I think that's a great example, especially because it adds an important feature on top of the model. Like you added something really new and valuable, which is the idea that the tokenization and the decentralization improves the network effects of the microservice DAO. So that to me would be a strong incentive to decentralize.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richie, over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, what's up? Yeah, I think that the interesting thing here is like there has to be a perfect storm in order for there to be really a race to the bottom, because there's like actually a scarcity of like human ingenuity that is like interested in solving a problem that's already solved. And so you sort of, if you have something that's good enough and is doing the job, it would have to be both perfectly automatable and have somebody who is interested, who is at the right skill sets to automate it again, and interested in doing something someone else has already done. And so you sort of have these, like, the amount of like that Venn diagram is really small because of how scarce that talent even is in the first place. And so I think that like often when we have these kinds of conversations, like I often like forget just how scarce like that level of talent is. And often that is the bottleneck of like having competition in certain areas that like, oh, well, someone already did it, and like that, they did a pretty good job already. So, you know, not going to go do it again.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that if you think about like the innovation adoption curve, like people innovating, creating a new thing, like maybe they're the ones who are finding product market fit and starting to automate it. And then people who come later, who are maybe learning from them or kind of like the early adopters, might be the people who actually support the decentralization. I think innovators are going to innovate. So a sneak peek for later is like my big thesis right now is the mechanism design, actually creating these types of automations is like the highest leverage activity that we can do. And being an RN DAO to present this, I think I find a lot of people who believe the same thing. But we might be an archetype of people trying to create the innovation, the initial fit between the offering and the DAOs that want to use it, and the people who actually take it to more mass adoption might be a different archetype, and decentralization could support that too.
One thing, which is actually the case with regular companies too, right? Like the entrepreneurs are usually more of like an artist archetype, but in mature companies, it's more of like an MBA, risk-averse, conservative archetype that like tends to take it through later stages. So that mirrors that evolution as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matthew, over to you.
Yeah, I think another, like, thinking about also the point of decentralizing, especially given what we've kind of just talked about having the highest leverage activity being developed algorithm in the first place, is that there's very much a long tail problem in AI. In the sense that after the AI has its initial training, and then there's obviously a variety of edge cases that are really difficult to get to unless we have this kind of incentivization mechanism unless you have an incentivization mechanism that encourages people that may have these little bits of data that are necessary to solve for these edge cases. It could be really difficult to come up with something that's comprehensive enough to solve that problem, which is also my 2 cents on the matter.
That's a great point too. I think that we're getting a little bit into the how of creating the AI. So there's a premise here, which is that microservice DAOs are a perfect container through which automation and AI can emerge and have leverage an existing relationship to DAOs. But then the question is, how do you actually build AIs for different use cases? And depending on the complexity of the use case and which particular technologies are being used, some of those things might be really hard to do. So the idea that some of those use cases might get easier because of the network effects of decentralization, such as getting long tail data, that's actually a very interesting point to expound on too. So thank you for that. All right,
Fantastic.
Good jam. Happy to come back to this. There's a couple more slides I'd like to share. The third section, now that we have this as the foundation, the agent-based modeling frame, the fact that emergent complexity comes from even very simple rules, and in DAOs we already have beyond simple rules. We have a lot of possible interactions. We have the microservice DAOs as a container for emergent automation and the existing relationship as the kind of API of a DAO. And then the third bit here is where are the areas that AI might create value in DAOs? So here are some ideas. I've got 12. I'm sure that we could come up with a dozen more just with even from y'all's existing information, and hopefully spark some idea to kind of go exponential here. So some ideas I've been thinking about as I've been participating in DAOs include the following. So tuning the parameters of a summoning contract in order to iterate on the economic and the game design experiments that constitute the DAO. The example of this I think is really brilliant is the Token Engineering Commons, the TEC, has created bonding curve simulations, and they'll have a bunch of people basically propose the input parameters to the bonding curve for a particular token launch, and they'll discuss them and they'll pick one and they'll hatch it. They've kind of a whole process around that. And in my view, what they're doing is they're creating the training data and expertise around how to create the input parameters for a DAO or a token to make it effective. And that I think expands to DAOs as well. You can imagine a Moloch DAO that is getting summoned by an AI that is putting different parameters on the the amount of shares rewarded for certain things, the amount of shares that are needed to join, the proposal length, time, the quorums to pass. Basically, I think we're seeing like an explosion of governance experiments in the space right now, and agent-based modeling simulations could help us do that more effectively. The actual making of proposals, this is kind of a collective sense-making idea. So thinking about when we have a bunch of ideas happening in Discord, a bunch of things happening in synchronous calls like this, how do you synthesize all of the components of what people are thinking and try to get the mean, a meaningful mean that would advance a particular goal for the DAO? That approach of getting the core goals, wants, desires of the individual agents and synthesizing that into a collective DAO goal, and then an approach to achieve that goal as a DAO through all the disparate components of the communications that are happening, without maybe one person synthesizing and trying to come up with a proposal and have people vote yes or no on it, which doesn't usually create a lot of it's not usually that contentious. I think that's an interesting application for AI. Attention management, specifically, what I mean is DAOstack was working on this even like maybe 5 years ago. The idea of creating basically like saying which proposals are meaningful and which ones are not. So if there's 100 proposals across the 5 DAOs that I'm in that are open right now, I don't have time to look at all 100 proposals, which, given the amount of time that I can input and the potential reward that I'll get from putting my time on these proposals, which ones should I actually ingest and advocate for myself? That I think that that's just going to become a major theme in DAOs. Especially, it's basically like, you know, and it's the same. It's a very similar idea to bring your own algorithm for Twitter. It's like, okay, I've got so many tweets, which ones should I actually read because they're predicted to be high value to me? And then, of course, that should be a human in the loop system that I can give feedback to and eventually curate over time. We could talk about filter bubbles if you guys want to talk about filter bubbles. The other half of that is voting on behalf of individual members. So if I'm only looking at 20 of the 100 proposals that are active in my 5 DAOs today, then what happens for the other 80%? Have I delegated my vote and it automatically goes to whoever I delegated to? Do I want to redelegate? How do I know which of the that those other 80% are being taken care of well? Do I just abstain and we have the same kind of governance problems that we have today? One thing that I think will be really compelling is that an agent that learns my desired outcomes and is voting on the things that are clear to the agent that which way to vote on my behalf, or they're low enough impact that it doesn't really matter which way the agent votes, and the agent is using that as training data. And for 3 and 4, I have to give a lot of credit to my previous co-founder, John McCoy, because we came up with a lot of this, the sentiment for this together. Paulo, you got something?
Yeah, do you feel that this could lead to, I don't know how to call it, but kind of like a progressive delegation in DAOs? Like if DAOs start with 2 human beings and then 100 and then 1,000 and so on, there will be a point where people will need to start delegating. And it would be cool if the AI could learn from previous votes of all people involved and kind of dynamically create delegates that represent different factions of people, totally. And then vote for them, right? And I would call that progressive delegation in the sense of like, we would not start the DAO immediately with delegates. We'd start the DAO with 1 person or whatever, token vote, whatever. But then we'll just make delegation later, retroactively looking at the real voting data, right? So I think this is interesting in the sense that it doesn't force a delegation now from the beginning. It just adopts it if there is groups of factions that usually vote in the same way, and the AI could represent that.
Definitely, that's a great idea. You could have archetypes or like party representatives that were voting on behalf of an ideology and then delegate to those. that's kind of a different take on the automated voting, but I definitely think that we'll see that too.
And the other alternative to delegation is to recognize expertise. So that's what algorithms can do quite well as well, right? So you might do expertise weighted voting. So not everybody has the same expertise for every issue, and your past track record of actions and contributions and voting can be pretty good training data for figuring out which kind of problems you might uniquely have expertise in, which would then scale up the weight on your vote for particular issues. So that's an alternative to delegation, I think.
1000% agree. I'm a big fan of reputation systems, and I think that basically what you're describing is a sort of reputation system based on the like predicted impact of the things that you voted for. So you could have a reputation system for delegates that says this person gets toward the desired outcome frequently. This person represents this value that the DAO holds. This person is a good active voter, and those could impact the weight of those voters' governance power. I love that idea. Number 5, compensation. I think that I often think about things in DAOs on the scale from humanistic to mechanistic, which is a spectrum I got from my friend Spencer Graham. Humanistic is like humanistic coordination. Compensation is like coordinate. We put a tool where we're all putting inputs and weighting one another as to how much value we think we created, and then there's a way of glomming those together that comes out with the actual compensation amounts that each person will receive. That's like one step from pure humanistic coordination, because it does have a mechanism involved. Pure mechanistic would be that I think an AI is determining who gets paid what amounts, and that's in terms of like upside, which is the native tokens or stable coins or whatever economic upside, the governance power. So like how what we were just talking about, the reputational rewards and who should receive what, so that the DAO further achieves its goals. It's like the integral of goal achievement, and then reputational rewards. So how do you give people status in the DAO? And I think that one of the things that is cool about Coordinate is it's also, thinking about things as the training data for the eventual AIs. All of the things that are being developed with people distributing give in Coordinate for particular sets of tasks with particular amounts of visibility, I think will eventually be used to try to give more automated versions of compensation. This is definitely a really scary one to me, because what happens if the AI messes up? It's like a not wanting to give up control aspect, but I do think that especially in the largest and most permissionless DAOs, that compensation will become increasingly mechanistic. Test execution I've talked about a lot in the concept of the microservice DAO. So whatever service that microservice DAO is providing, like an agency, those things as they get automated would be task execution. A depth parameter is a, oh, actually we got another question. Shahar? I think you're muted. I think your microphone is muted.
Yeah, sorry. Hi.
Hi.
All of these clauses, they're like very delicate, like if something is being tempered or there's like a glitch, something, it's like, so perhaps this is where the decentralization comes in, right? In the service AI, like there's maybe several nodes running the same AI algorithm, and there's some mean afterwards, or like some optimistic version of that, right? I guess like this is what you meant by decentralization, because I didn't get it exactly.
I'm not sure if I completely understand your question. So are you asking about if decentralization will help support kind of like the danger of automating some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, like the automation of these things, like it raises issues of resilience, like because if something happens, So you need to like increase the redundancy somehow, right? So this is like the decentralization component that you meant earlier. This is what I'm trying to understand.
I see. I think the decentralization component here is really about helping many more people reap the benefits of the automations, despite having had a small group of people create it. I think that the AI safety components, which is a whole another talk, probably not one that I feel qualified to give, is definitely redundancy is an aspect, but I think there will be DAOs that try to automate and die, and we kind of like sacrifice them on the stochastic altar of progress to kind of go toward increased efficiency. There are DAOs that are dying today because they adopt governance processes that don't work. It's a similar thing. So hopefully, my hope is that we can minimize the total suffering in the industry by being able to share those experiments in an open source way, and prevent more DAOs from dying from the same automation failures. But I do think that there will be the road of progress will be littered with dead smart contracts.
Yeah. Yeah, I see also.
Does
like,
that answer your question?
Yeah, it's just a different, like someone also wrote in the chat, like the ambiguity of the term decentralization in this context, like a distributed algorithm that runs in some way, but rather like in more sense of ownership. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Paulo?
Yeah, I think I was gonna comment on something you added, Nick, which is, as we've seen several times, algorithms can be manipulated, maybe, or tricked into doing stuff that they shouldn't do, and this I think it poses a risk of AI safety, like you said, right? And I imagine that if there's a big DAO with a big treasury that adopts an AI algorithm to govern that treasury in some way, there'll be a big honeypot behind hacking that algorithm, right? And trying to incentivize people to drain the treasury in some way. So I also fear that the creation of that honeypot will bring a lot of funny stories for us to do postmortems on. Let's just say it like that.
Yeah. Totally. I realize that I'm remiss to not have mentioned MEV in this talk at all. So that's a really interesting example. I think that there are many with the Ethereum as a dark forest frame, there are many attack vectors and motivations to make attacks on various ways. So people are trying to hack smart contracts to get money out of treasuries. People are trying to social engineer to hack validators to get money out of treasuries. People will try to, become governance whales to get money out of treasuries, and people will definitely try to manipulate AI for the same thing. So building resilience to that is going to be super important. I totally agree.
Yeah, interesting attack vector could be like increasing the bias of the training data of the AI or something like that.
Totally.
Yeah, subvertly and slowly and without anybody noticing. Yeah. That's very scary. That's very, very scary, because you'll never know that's happening. That's basically the problem.
Yeah.
And there is a whole thing around our black box systems, or constantly adaptable systems, more resilient than systems that have a set way of functioning. So if we're looking at neural networks versus more simple algorithms like the one we currently use in governance and so on, that someone can spend loads of time studying until they find the vulnerability, as opposed to a system that's constantly changing how it operates, and so might be harder to hack just because it's changing on itself. There was an interesting experiment on that in ENS with constantly updating parameters for attributing compensation based on source cred sort of analysis. But anyway, perhaps we have 7 minutes left. Maybe Nick, if you want to cover the other points, and then we see how much time we have at the end.
I just have my ideas here, and I would say that my ideas are now much less interesting to me than other ideas that you all would like to share. So I can put some of the other ones on the screen, but I would love to just stop talking and hear more about what AI interfaces or ways that AIs can create value would be interesting to you all, or ones that you'd like to see or that you'd like to help build.
Can I propose something? If we do a Zoom poll voting right now with all the 12 ideas that you have here, and we all vote to try to get a ranking out of them.
Sure, that's fun. Let's see.
Let's see if that's possible to do. Well, maybe that's not possible to do. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know how to do the poll, but I'm copying it so that the text is available for usage.
No, sorry.
We
That
are
was
few
a
enough
stupid...
if we could each just put our
It's not gonna
favorite
work.
one in chat. I think that's probably going to be fast.
Or that, yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Can you try to put them all on the same screen, Nick?
Yeah, I can do that.
They're in the chat already. Sorry. Yeah, cool.
Okay, yeah, that works too. Nice. So while we're just voting in the chat on which of these you would be most excited to see, I'll just share my kind of closing idea. I don't think I need to do the recap. The closing idea is basically that the highest leverage activity that I think we can be doing right now is to do mechanism design. So all of the components of what we've talked about today, what we can do is basically say, let's create microservice DAOs that are learning how to find product market fit with the application that they're creating, learning how to automate using mechanism design, and then actually scaling those up and decentralizing them. I think that's the fastest way to open source to drive forward on the possibility of the coordination flippening. And I also think that it is the highest leverage activity that we can do for value creation and personal value capture. And I'm just really excited to see where the future of organization lies when we have this open source coordination with composable mechanisms that are fundamentally decentralized and supporting us in governing artificial intelligence collectively and safely. I think that the mesh network of DAOs that have AIs participating in them is really what artificial general intelligence will manifest as. And I'm really looking forward to creating this future with you all.
Super exciting. Thanks a lot, Nick, for sharing, and for everyone else for participating. I'm gonna share in the chat the link to the AI and DAO Discord. If anyone wants to continue the conversation there, we still have 3 minutes. So we can continue chatting in the meantime. Also, we're gonna run out of time very soon. I'm seeing that there seems to be a soft consensus around attention management as the
I wonder if this is because it is very painful currently. It feels like a big pain point, so that's high ROI, or if it feels like it's accessible.
It's also accessible. I mean, one low-tech version of that is the bots in Slack, right? So they're already doing versions of that.
Totally.
I would also add that it feels like it's the least risky to outsource to an AI. Because, I mean, if the AI summarizes what I should be paying attention for, I still need to do some work. So I'm not giving full responsibility to AI to vote for me or to decide for me or whatever. Right? So it also seems like the most easy to outsource to an AI. Less risky. So.
Can I ask another question? When you talk about mechanism design, you mean for the mechanism design of the like global DAO where the AI is an agent inside of, or like the mechanism design in the AI service DAO?
What's the difference?
Good question.
My current belief as someone, I'm building right now HATS protocol, which is a tool, it's a mechanism that will allow for DAOs to delegate specific authorities to their members and to sub DAOs and to AIs. Like you can give a revocable but non-transferable NFT to a contract or an EOA or another DAO or a pod. The reason I'm building that is because I think as a primitive, it's one of the most impactful ratchets to support the development of more coordination power in DAOs. So like go out and find the areas where you think that they're the biggest pain points and try to create automations that are there, whether that's a DAO that you're in or several DAOs that you're in where you can kind of create leverage across them. And I think that we'll see the bottoms up emergent complexity from these simple mechanisms and primitives is really what's going to, like Conway's Game of Life, that's going to give the really robust anti-fragile mesh network that it drives the space forward. Great question.
Thanks.
All right.
Nick, would you be okay with sharing the slides?
Sure, happy to. Can I just drop the link in the chat?
Yeah, something like that. Awesome.
Cool. Or we can follow up. Actually, let me just consolidate a couple things.
Yeah, Nick, if you want, you can send it to me and I'll share it in the DAO Discord, and also we can send them when we publish the video of the talk.
Perfect.
There. And well, if anyone wants to continue the conversation, we're also there. Thank you everyone for joining. This has been really, really interesting. Lots of food for thought.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for co-creating. Really a pleasure. And thanks for Daniel and for DAO for having me.